Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this 4-episode series brought to you with underwriting from Taylor and Francis, we're talking about how academic libraries can demonstrate value to campus administrators. As we know, the digital transformation, the rise of accountability and assessment, austerity measures after the 2008 market crash, and the evolving scholarly communication landscape have all contributed to a more unified strategic orientation and departmental accountability across campus. The publication of ACRL's Standards for Libraries in Higher Education in the fall of 2011 addresses this shift with practical guidance, and yet many libraries have more work to do to be seen as valued partners in their institutions. Joining me to discuss the whys and hows of a robust value proposition are Hilary Craiglow, Library Consulting Practice Lead at Attain Partners, Dr. Jeffrey Gold, President of the University of Nebraska System, and Emily McElroy, Vice President of Academic Relations at Taylor and Francis. But before we get started, if you want to keep up on the latest programming from the Authority File, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter for information on the current and previous month's episodes. To subscribe, simply visit choice360.org, click on the newsletter sign-up banner in the top right corner, and select the Choice Podcast Updates option. While you're there, you can also sign up for other newsletters published by Choice. In this final episode of our 4-part series, we situate our discussion in today's social, economic, and political landscape, explaining why a library's value proposition is so crucial amidst conditions that are above and beyond what might be considered part of a normal operating environment. I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of the why the library's ability to communicate its value is so critical, and I want to situate that importance in today's current political climate. I mean, we started the first episode explaining certain resource constraints, and there are others that are, above and beyond, what might be considered a normal operating environment. So Hilary or Emily, again, can you situate, some of these important things that we've been talking about in what's happening all around us today?
Yeah, I'll start. And I'll talk about one dimension in particular, if that's okay. So a large
Sure.
percentage of my work is at the intersection of higher ed, libraries, and federal funding. And I feel like it's important to acknowledge that this disruption we're experiencing is profound. And recognizing that, supporting one another is important. People in our industry are dedicated. We want to transform lives through education. We want to help solve real world problems through rigorous inquiry and discovery. We're passionate people. And these ongoing changes will take a toll. The library's ability to communicate value is really critical in this moment. Again, my consulting practice has a focus on demonstrating the value of libraries in terms of federal grant funding. And so that is what I'll touch on. As federal agencies, NIH, NSF, et cetera, have imposed these significant caps on the university's ability to recover costs that it has already invested in campus infrastructure, including the library. This is infrastructure that supports sponsored grants, contracts. This represents a real fundamental shift that we see that's threatening research infrastructure, its funding, and our ability to lead in these areas. If I may, universities have already incurred an estimated of $6.8 billion in unreimbursed research expenses. So these additional caps are just dramatic and will increase the university's burden. And so this is why we're seeing a lot of these, or one of the many reasons we're seeing these budget constraints across universities. And libraries are an essential part of that research infrastructure. And so now we need to be part of the solutions. So in terms of these funding changes in the research enterprise, libraries can demonstrate that their direct contributions to research outcomes through initiatives that we do, data management planning, publishing support, data curation, bibliometrics of licensed materials and systematic reviews, and published research, as well as all of our specialized data and collections. These are indispensable investments that the university has made. And those libraries that are unable to articulate their role in supporting this kind of work, or if I will, maybe I'll flip this and say libraries that cannot do that are not accelerating the work of PIs, and they may face potential marginalization as universities absorb these funding cuts, while they're also trying to maintain their research competitiveness. So I will argue that libraries that support research teams are one of the most cost-effective ways to accelerate research. Our work allows scientists to focus on the science. Libraries supporting the research effort through our special roles. We need to be able to explain that in a compelling way and be part of the solutions.
Right. Thank you, Hilary. Emily, Jeff, anything you want to add to that?
I think we've been talking a lot about the ability of librarians to effectively communicate their value as a best practice, but I would say in this current environment, it's an existential necessity. And this convergence has created really a perfect storm that requires strategic action from librarians. And they need to reconsider how they articulate what the value proposition is, whether it's stakeholders, policymakers, and the broader community. And one thing that still benefits libraries is that they have largely maintained their reputation as trustworthy sources of information. And so librarians can really demonstrate that this reputation is well-founded because of their professional training, their ethical commitments, and evidence-based practices. And just as Hilary outlined, we're economically efficient. And so that investment in them pays off through their services, their resources, and that expertise that they bring.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of this in two different frameworks. One, let's address research first. I think Hilary and Emily really hit the nail on the head when we talk about what the services that libraries provide. These are direct services. Now, we talk about the balance between direct and indirect cost recovery from extramurally competed grants. Many of these services that the libraries provide can be considered direct and not indirect services, in spite of the fact that over decades, we have thought of libraries as sort of an indirect infrastructure cost, almost in the category of heating and cooling and lighting and other such things that are just necessary to support a research environment. So the ability to provide the research teams, and I mean the individual investigators, with the correct language that they can incorporate into their grant proposals, I think is a way of shifting that from an indirect to a direct source of funding, be it competed federal or commercial or investigator initiated or whatever the type of research might be. The other side of that is on the instructional side. And there is no accreditation body that I'm aware of at the university level or at the specialty level, think engineering, business, medicine, law, I mean, it goes on and on and on, that doesn't have very specific reference requirements that need to be met. And again, there needs to be very specific language that can be provided to the individual program, college, or campus, depending on what you're talking about at the accreditation level, as to how the resources, meaning the programming, not the physical building or the coffee shop in the lobby, but the actual programming supports the continued successful accreditation of the academic programs. So those are two areas that we have focused on that I think are, there are probably others. I'll give you maybe one other, and that is as a land grant institution, we operate, I think, last count, 83 different extension offices across the state. These are critical to the farming and ranching communities that we support in a very rural agricultural-based state. Agriculture is the single largest enterprise in the state of Nebraska. Well, guess what? These farmers and ranchers and these extension offices desperately need appropriately up-to-date library services in order to help these individuals improve crop yields. And if you haven't checked the price of corn or soybeans recently, we need to do everything we can to optimize that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to point out this doesn't all rest solely on the shoulders of library leaders, all the things we've been discussing. So I'm wondering if you all could share some tactical recommendations for library leaders on communicating these value proposition strategies to their staff. What are some best practices for developing, a shared reporting system that collects the information necessary to support this messaging, for example? What can, I guess, how can leaders delegate some of this to across, a library staff to help get this all accomplished? Emily, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think part of this was I was learning so much as a new dean and best practices from watching my colleagues and realizing that how much of that knowledge we don't really like. No one teaches you these things in library school. So
Mm-hmm.
some of the just basic things that we did was really looking at what are those best practices for setting objectives and what are meaningful metrics in terms of strategic planning systems, things like that. Working on elevator pitches. And we literally shared an elevator with campus administration. So that was even more important. But really to be able, whether it's someone coming in, whether it's a student, a faculty member, an administrator, donor, everyone needed to be prepared to talk about value. We did create a system for qualitative data that we gathered from all sorts of interactions, but we also had to really explain like why that was important and how we were using that. Because statistics, as we've said, provide credibility and demonstrate impact, but those stories create that emotional connection and help everyone understand what that means in personal terms. And then the other thing is I was very transparent about the budget, and I had quarterly updates on the budget and shared a lot of information every month because I wanted everyone to have an understanding of what their context was and why it was essential to align with campus, or why certain decisions were made, and that they could feel that they could also contribute some solutions. And I think that also just made people feel more comfortable and invested in describing what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hilary, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to amplify that. Obviously, you're a model here, Emily, because a communication strategy that includes helping all library employees kind of understand the institutional context where their work is situated is helpful and impactful. So regular briefings on university budget situations, strategic priorities, what the competitive challenges are. It helps staff understand the importance of their work, and then also the subsequent assessment that they're making in their systematic data collection and the impact documentation that they're producing. So when a circulation desk staff member understands that gate count can contribute to a space utilization argument that will possibly affect a library renovation, again, they become, like Emily said, more invested in good data collection, and their work becomes more meaningful for them. And I think I'll just add too that the best practices I think you're asking about, they involve having systematic data collection, but also creating narrative collection systems alongside with numerical data. So the testimonial from a faculty member, documentation of maybe a problem-solving scenario, or examples of interventions. So that qualitative evidence makes that quantitative data more meaningful, especially I think to administrators. I think I just want to say before you turn it over to Jeff that libraries we excel at sharing. And so we can certainly also share our best practices for communicating value and what our systematic approaches are and how we're collecting this kind of data. We can share that with each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that that having your team, your staff, your colleagues understand your strategy understand what you're measuring and why you're measuring it, understanding where they fit into it is really important, particularly if there's some turnover of staff and they have to feel that they're part of it. However, I think it was Emily who said earlier that culture is critical and that people need to understand, and all of our organizations, I don't care whether it's the faculty member in a most successful research lab or whether it's the person that cuts the grass and shovels the snow, that they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that the interaction that occurs with every individual at the front desk, with every email they return, with every phone call that they take and provide useful information for, really counts. There are no freebies in this, and that is how the mission is aligned within an organization. You can have the most sophisticated metrics and best written strategies and tactics, that you want. But if you don't have complete mission alignment and a culture that reinforces that sense of satisfaction, and by the way, celebrates your triumphs and cries on each other's shoulder when you don't meet your goals for one reason or another. I mean, we don't live in a perfect world where everything we want to do magically happens, but people need to feel valued, and they need to. I have found, at least, do much better when they feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves and something that they truly understand the importance of.
Excellent. Well, Emily, Hilary, and Jeff, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You just heard from Hilary Craiglow, Library Consulting Practice Lead at Attain Partners, Dr. Jeffrey Gold, President of the University of Nebraska System, and Emily McElroy, Vice President of Academic Relations at Taylor & Francis. This series is provided with underwriting support from Taylor & Francis. Remember, if you want to keep up on the latest programming from the Authority File, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter for information on the current and previous month's episode. To subscribe, simply visit choice360.org, click on the newsletter sign-up banner in the top right corner, and select the Choice Podcast Updates option. While you're there, you can also sign up for other newsletters published by Choice. The Authority File podcast is brought to you every week by a small but extraordinary team, including Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, and digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.